Really?
I mean, we released some stats in this State of Crypto report that showed 56% of the Fortune 500 executives report their company is working on something on-chain in crypto, right? And so it's the biggest companies in the world, you know.
포춘지가 선정한 세계에서 가장 큰 500대 기업의 임원 중 절반 이상이 회사에서 암호화폐를 활용한 프로젝트를 진행하고 있다고 주장하고 있는 인물은 미국의 1위 거래소이자 크립토 시장에 막대한 영향력을 끼치고 있는 코인베이스의 CEO 브라이언 암스트롱입니다. 현재 그 어느 때보다 지루하고 혼란스러운 시장 속에서 향후 크립토 시장과 블록체인 기술의 성장 가능성과 잠재력, 그리고 그가 생각하는 향후 크립토 시장의 전망에 대한 디테일한 인사이트에 대해서 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
The pleasure of interviewing Brian Armstrong. First of all, I want to thank you for being a visionary in this space. This is the biggest economic movement of my lifetime, and you know, from a technology point of view, it is rivaling AI, but I think the institutional world does not quite understand that this movement is as big as that one, and there will be probably convergence at some moment in time. Yes.
Both crypto and AI go through these summers and winters, and so I keep hoping at some time we'll have a coordinated summer of AI and crypto at the same time, but we'll see.
That would be nice. So let's start with your long-term mission for Coinbase and for crypto generally, or digital assets, as we are saying more and more these days.
Yeah, well, we fundamentally see crypto as a technology to update the financial system. The financial system it's slow, it's expensive, there's unequal access around the world. And the mission of Coinbase is really to increase economic freedom in the world. And so we're really passionate about this idea of how do we create good financial infrastructure for people all over the world that enforces things like property rights and sound money and free trade. And the beauty is that smartphones are now so inexpensive. You can buy one for, you know, maybe $10, $20 in anywhere in the world. The poorest people in the world now have smartphones. So if you have a smartphone and an internet connection, you can now have access to good financial infrastructure, property rights, the ability to earn a living, make a better life for yourself and your family. And that's a really powerful idea because economic freedom is kind of this underpinning of all progress, right? Like, more people are going to try to do good things for the world if they believe they can keep the upside of their labor.
Absolutely.
And America sort of takes us for granted sometimes because we're an anomaly historically, but many places in the world that's not the case. If you do manage to accumulate some wealth, it could be seized, confiscated from you, it could be devalued via inflation. And so if we're actually able to increase economic freedom globally, it would have an incredible outcome in terms of, like, it would bend the curve of progress for all humanity. So that's really what we're hoping to do with this technology.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We're watching devaluations around the world, and they're pretty massive in big countries. Like in March, Egypt devalued by 40%. Can you imagine? 40%. Nigeria over the last year, 50%. And again, I think we're seeing a domino effect, much like the Asian crisis in the 90s, which people may or may not remember. So where do you think, or what do you think the biggest obstacles are right now for you to achieve your vision?
Well, in the US, probably the biggest obstacle is regulatory clarity.
Definitely.
Unfortunately, the US is a little behind on this. Europe has already passed comprehensive crypto legislation. We've seen most of the G20 is actually already drafting or has implemented crypto legislation. And so there's broadly this recognition that this technology is here to stay. It has incredible innovative potential. We need to make sure we prevent consumer harm, things that happened with other companies and everyone's aware of. And so the US, I just got back from DC, a couple days in DC. I met with 12 or 13 different members of the Senate. The Senate is very eager to move on legislation now after the House passed the FIT 21 bill, the market structure bill, with strong bipartisan support. More than 2/3 of the House voted for it. And so the Senate now has a couple of bills being drafted that they're hopefully going to turn this into law, whether it's in this Congress later this year or the next Congress. So we've got a lot of work to do there, and it's important that America gets this right. In the absence of that clarity, I probably don't have to tell all of you, there has been a bit of this turf war between the CFTC and the SEC, the two federal regulators. Are these commodities? Are they securities? Our point of view is that the tokens, underlying assets are commodities. There could be an investment contract or something like that on top of it that is an actual security. Like if a company is going to raise money, that's a security. There should be a path to register those, broker-dealers that can trade them. And we'd like to work with the SEC to make that happen as well. But if we don't have Congress step in and act, the lack of clarity is just going to be weaponized and not allow the industry to thrive onshore.
And how about obstacles then in the rest of the world? What do you see? Is there a quicker take-up or embracing of this technology and these commodities around the world?
Well, there's about 10 markets around the world where Coinbase has set up local operations, and each of those has a slightly different story, right? Just to give you broad strokes. I mean, it's funny, in the UK and in Singapore, for instance, they don't have this issue that we have in the US of having a separate commodities and securities regulator. They just have one regulator. So for instance, the FCA in the UK, this is a total non-issue. The question about commodities and securities, it never comes up because they just have one federal regulator, so it's not politicized, right? And similarly in Singapore, that's the same issue. So each country has slightly different moments in time. Like Rishi Sunak in the UK was incredibly pro-crypto, and that government is now probably changing over. So we have to sort of, at any given moment, there's somewhere in the world where we see a big opportunity. President Milei coming in Argentina, for instance, has been super pro-crypto, right? So we just, in the global landscape, we sort of see who's in office, who's going to lean in and work with us. We grow our business there, and then when the guards change, in who's in office, we get an opportunity a few years later, and we grow it there. So we have a very long-term point of view on this. Whether it happens in any given year or decade in a certain country, we know the trend is clear long-term. Right,
and then back here in the U.S. then, so individuals have been very focused on this space well before institutions, right? And have participated in the movement. Can you talk a little bit about, institutions, what you're seeing from an institutional point of view, and actually why the take-up is perhaps so slow?
Well, I think you're correct that retail did jump into this space a little sooner over the last decade. But I'd say in just the last year or two, we've seen an incredible amount of institutional adoption, and I feel like institutions are fully in it at this point. Really? I mean, we released some stats in this State of Crypto report that showed 56% of the Fortune 500 executives report their company is working on something on-chain in crypto, right? And so it's the biggest companies in the world. BlackRock is helping tokenize real-world assets. JP Morgan has an on-chain project called Onyx. Google Cloud is accepting crypto payments, St. Jude's Hospital, and then fintechs like Stripe and PayPal, they're adding stablecoin support. So 56% of the Fortune 500 is doing something. I think this is really here to stay. It's already happening amongst institutions. And Coinbase can play a big role there too. Our Coinbase Prime product is the most successful in the institutional space, and we've got about a third of the top 100 hedge funds, our clients. A lot of them are also looking for that regulatory clarity moment, and I think when I talk to the institutional investors, often they'll say, once we feel like there's regulatory clarity, which will not be some moment in time, it's a gradual trend that's happening. They're like, that's what would cause us to put 5-10% of our portfolio in instead of a couple of percent.
So that's interesting, our different perceptions, because having just launched the Spot Bitcoin ETF, what we've seen is none of the major platforms have approved it yet. So the flows we've seen, and they've been great, have either been just from retail or they've been donated by Grayscale. A lot of it was donated by Grayscale, but we're still waiting for an approval, even from the platforms that do tend to approve new, interesting, different financial instruments. They're waiting, and maybe all this is we need one, and then there'll be a very rapid adoption, because competitively it's going to be very important to have this new asset class, we believe, on platforms.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think you could argue we haven't really seen the real inflows happen even in ETFs, and they've already been really good. I mean, from the numbers I've seen, there's far more demand in ETFs than is being mined every day from Bitcoin, for instance, which is a positive indicator. But you're right. I think Morgan Stanley, UBS, some of these firms, they haven't really enabled the ETFs where we'll see even larger inflows in the future potentially. I don't know why that is, but the ETFs actually is an area where we did get regulatory clarity. So this will happen in bits and pieces, and I think it's an incredible first step.
Yes. And then let's get into products, Coinbase's products. Which are the most exciting products to you these days?
Yeah. Well, the first one is really a technology improvement that'll enable lots of products. But if any of you haven't seen Base, it's our layer 2 solution. It's really important to help blockchains scale. And so, layer 1 networks were the first thing that happened in crypto. They were kind of slow, they were kind of expensive, but you could see the potential of it. With layer 2 coming online, it's kind of like when the internet moved from dial-up to broadband. It's actually enabling things like you can now send USD coin instantly anywhere in the world for free. And that's a game changer for things like payments and remittance and all kinds of things that just reduce friction in the economy. So that's one. Derivatives is another thing. We now have our derivatives products live both in the US under our FCM and internationally under our international exchange. That's an important part of any sort of capital market, and we've seen really good traction there. The last one I'd say is we released something called our smart wallet. So this one it's a little bit technical still, but a lot of developers have started to use it. And it essentially makes the onboarding process for someone to get a crypto wallet in any kind of application much easier. It's using things like biometrics. So, in the past, you had to remember this 12-word phrase, and you had to save it in a password manager, and sometimes people would, put it in the wrong spot, and they would lose it. Now you can really just use a biometric like a fingerprint, and boom, you have a crypto wallet in any application. And so we're starting to see crypto wallets get added into lots of different Web 2 companies, lots of Web 3 companies that are kind of native on chain. And really, what we're seeing just zooming out here is like crypto started as an asset class that people wanted to invest in, and it's great. It's more than $1 trillion, and we've got over 400 million people globally, have used crypto now, about 5% of the global population. We're now starting to see it go from an asset class to real-world utility. Payments and voting and decentralized social and having a direct relationship with content creators and their fans, and all these kind of things are now coming online. And so that's how we get it to be 1 billion people or more using this. And it's following kind of a similar adoption curve as the early internet.